Hello, welcome to Raja Reads. I'm Masood Raja, and on this channel I introduce you to books from different parts of the world. And today I'm here to introduce one of the most significant novels from the 20th century, and that is Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. Now, as you can see, I'm recording in my backyard, so please do forgive me if you hear some bird noises or if any of our cats or chickens join us, because that is part of the deal when you're in your backyard. So, going back to the novel, Salman Rushdie, of course, is one of the most prominent British authors of Indian origin. And Midnight's Children was actually his second novel. It was published in 1981 and to great acclaim immediately. The same year, I think it won the Booker Prize, which is now called the Man Booker Prize. It was a highly regarded novel. Quite a few critics also believe that Midnight's Children as a novel was instrumental in reviving the British novel as an art form, as a genre of writing. So most reviews would tell you that it's a novel about India, especially about India's partition. And that is the simplistic explanation you can get about the novel. But the novel is historically driven, but also character driven. The main character is Salim Sinai. So from the name, of course, it's obvious he's a Muslim character. And we experience the colonial aspects of India, the colonial past of India, the partition of India in 1947 into India and Pakistan, and post-partition life until the 1980s through the experiences of Salim Sinai. Now, the novel is kind of a limit modernist text. It's a modernist text, but it also at places becomes postmodern. Now, for that, of course, simply stated, a postmodernist work is, which has the traits of a modernist work, the density, the elusive nature of it, maybe the secret at the core of the novel. But then, as a postmodernist novel, it kind of makes fun of itself. There are a lot of metafictional parts in it. And then it undermines sometimes its own logic, and it's self-reflexive. The novel talks about itself, and it is intertextual. That means it is borrowing from other novels of its own kind to tell the story. So if you just read the beginning, here is a character who's speaking in first person even before he's born, right? That is clearly borrowed from Tristram Shandy, right? Or Günter Grass's Tin Drum. So that is the intertextual element of the story. Then there is also magical part in the story, which a lot of critics call magic realism. But it doesn't really qualify for me as magic realism, because one characteristics of any work being magic realist is that magic is offered as everyday happening, like in Garcia Marquez's works. But here, magic announces itself as magic, so hence probably fantastical, but not necessarily technically magic realism. So keep that in mind if anyone ever mentions that about the novel. Now, going over the plot, it's a very complicated plot. Okay, we are in the present, where Salim Sinai is a grown-up, but he's recounting the story before his birth. His parents, Adam Aziz, are from Kashmir Valley. So the first part of the novel is Dr. Aziz losing his faith, then courting his future wife, and then the birth of our protagonist, Salim Sinai. Then there is a twist. We are told that the children were switched, which is never really resolved. I mean, that is one of the flaws of the novel. But as you read it, you will make connections. Now, throughout the novel, at most of the places, Salim Sinai is telling the story to the woman that he lives with. Her name is Padma. And what we learn is that maybe he works at a pickle factory, right? And Padma is kind of your critic. She's a skeptic. She asks him questions and everything else. Then Salim Sinai's life since he's born at midnight, August 15, 1947, in one way or the other, immediately gets connected to the life of India, historically, but also in some magical sense. We are also told that there were about 1,000 children who were born at the same moment, and they all have different capabilities and they have different magical qualities. Now, Salim Sinai's main quality is that he can hear all the other children and telepathically communicate with them as he grows older. Now, beyond that, the novel is Salim Sinai's struggles as connected to India's struggles itself, right? India's relationships with Pakistan, the wars between India and Pakistan. At one point, he ends up in Pakistan, where he has kind of lost his mind, and he is recruited by the Pakistani army as this sniffing human dog, right? And then he's deployed in Bangladesh, which was then East Pakistan in 1971 war. And that's where the novel has the most magical part, which I love, and that is when Salim and three other soldiers kind of escape the war. They travel through the Sundarbans. Now, Sundarbans is a riverine forest, right? It's a mangrove forest, and it's intricate and hard to traverse through its waterways. And that, to me, is the most magical experience which these three soldiers, so to speak, including Salim Sinai, pass through, right? And from then he is smuggled back into India, and he is living with Padma. But by the end of the novel, what we learn is that he is slowly disintegrating, and he is soon going to die, but he has had a son with Padma. And maybe in that we read probably also what Rushdie seems to be suggesting is kind of, a dismantling of India. Now, do also keep in mind that the novel was written at the time when Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, had declared emergency and, stopped so many things that people could otherwise do, freedom of expression, freedom of the press. So the novel is also a critique of that. But if you read the ending, that's where Salim Sinai is talking about future, which you could read as the future of India as well. It is kind of the similar ending that you see in Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, and that's what makes the novel kind of intertextual, and I will read it. Yes, they will trample me underfoot, the numbers marching 1, 2, 3, 400 million, 506, reducing me to specks of voiceless dust. Just as, all in good time, they will trample my son who is not my son, and his son who will not be his, and his who will not be his, until the 1,001st generation, until 1,001 midnights have bestowed their terrible gifts. And 1,001 children have died, because it is the privilege and the curse of midnight's children to be both masters and victims of their times, to forsake privacy and be sucked into the annihilating whirlpool of the multitude, and to be unable to live or die in peace. Now, if you just go and read the final passages of Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, you will see the similarities of theme, but also the tone. So overall, I mean, it is a huge novel, and there is no way I can sum it up in a brief conversation like this. If you decide to read it, please be prepared for a narrative which may not be linear, which may also use English that you're not familiar with, right? It is a hard read, but once you get into the story, I would say focus on the story, focus on what is happening. Look up historical events. Some of them are fictional, some of them are real, and that is also something that you have to distinguish in a postmodernist novel. Overall, I can promise you that after you come out of this novel, your understanding of India would be far more complex than what you might have entered with into the novel. Now, if you're a researcher, what can you write about Midnight's Children? Of course, that's a very hard question to answer because so much is written about Midnight's Children. You could write about it from a comparative point of view, whether it is a postmodern novel or not. Or you could look at the historical events and see what kind of an impact they have within the narrative of the novel itself, or possibility of someone such as Salim Sinai existing. You could write about the partition and how does Salman Rushdie represent it. You could also write about India and its rise as a global power, as a regional power, and what cost was there for that rise. All of these things could form really good research topics. But overall, if you ever want to read just one novel by Salman Rushdie, I highly recommend Midnight's Children. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for being a part of my life. I will now sign off, but I hope you're all taking care of each other, taking care of yourselves. Stay safe, and I will now see you next time. Until then, peace and love.